Marcus Davidson had waited 32 years to find his perfect bride, spending countless hours on international dating sites and thousands of dollars on translation services to find the woman who would complete his American dream. But behind her shy smiles and broken English, his new wife was hiding connections to the Russian mafia that would turn their honeymoon suite into a battlefield. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because the stories we uncover will shatter everything you think you know about love, marriage, and the deadly prices people pay for their perfect life. Now, let's go back to where it all began. The 42nd floor of the Goldman Sachs Tower in Lower Manhattan had been Marcus Davidson's kingdom for the past 8 years. From his corner office overlooking the Hudson River, the 32-year-old investment banker had built a reputation as one of Wall Street's most aggressive deal-makers, specializing in Eastern European acquisitions that had made his clients millions and himself wealthy beyond his small-town Ohio dreams. Marcus possessed the kind of sharp intelligence that could dissect complex financial structures in minutes, but when it came to personal relationships, he had proven remarkably unsuccessful. His 60-hour work weeks and obsessive attention to detail had destroyed 3 serious relationships by the time he turned 30, leaving him isolated in his luxury Upper East Side apartment with nothing but his growing bank account for company. Standing just under 6 feet tall, with prematurely gray hair that made him look distinguished rather than old, Marcus had the polished appearance of old money despite his middle-class background. His custom-tailored suits and expensive watches were carefully chosen to project success and stability, qualities that had made him invaluable to his clients, but somehow failed to attract the kind of woman he imagined as his wife. The decision to pursue an international bride had come after yet another failed relationship with a Manhattan attorney who had accused him of being emotionally unavailable and married to his work. Marcus had initially resisted the suggestion from his colleague James Patterson, who had found happiness with a Ukrainian woman through an international marriage agency. "You're thinking about this all wrong," James had told him during one of their late-night conversations in the office. "American women want to compete with your career, change your priorities, make you into something you're not. Women from traditional cultures understand that a man's work is important. They want to support your success, not undermine it." The concept had appealed to Marcus's analytical mind. Why continue failing at relationships with women who didn't appreciate his ambition when there were women in other countries who would value his success and stability? The international dating sites offered detailed profiles, translation services, and even arranged meetings that eliminated much of the uncertainty that had plagued his previous attempts at romance. Eastern European women, in particular, seemed to understand what Marcus was looking for. They were educated but traditional, beautiful but not demanding, interested in building families rather than competing careers. The profiles he studied during his lunch breaks showed women who spoke of loyalty, family values, and appreciation for hardworking men, everything that seemed to be missing from his experiences with American dating. It was on Eurolove.com that Marcus first encountered the profile of Katarina, a 26-year-old English teacher from Minsk, Belarus. Her photographs showed a stunning blonde with classical features and bright blue eyes that seemed to convey both intelligence and warmth. Her profile essay, translated from Russian, spoke eloquently about her desire to find a serious man who valued family and traditional marriage. "I'm looking for partnership built on respect and understanding," her profile read. "I believe man should be leader of family, and woman should create beautiful home and raise children with love. I am tired of men in my country who have no ambition or stability. I want to build real future with American man who appreciates loyalty and dedication." The sentiments were exactly what Marcus had hoped to find. Here was a woman who understood that his career success was an asset, not a competition. Someone who wanted to build a life around his achievements rather than demanding he sacrifice his ambitions for relationship compromises. Their correspondence began in February 2024, with Marcus paying for professional translation services to ensure their communication was clear and meaningful. Katarina's letters revealed a thoughtful, cultured woman who taught English literature at a private school in Minsk and cared for her elderly grandmother in a small apartment near the city center. She wrote about her love of classical music and Russian poetry, her dreams of seeing New York's museums and theaters, and her hope of finding a man who would value her intelligence as much as her devotion. The letters painted a picture of someone who had been disappointed by the limited opportunities in her homeland and was ready to embrace a new life with the right partner. In Belarus, good men are very rare, she wrote in one particularly touching message. Most drink too much, have no goals, expect women to work, and also do all household duties. I see in your letters that you're a different kind of man. Serious, successful, with clear vision for future. This is what I have been hoping to find. Marcus found himself eagerly anticipating each new message, often checking his email multiple times throughout the day to see if Katarina had responded to his latest letter. Their exchanges became increasingly personal over the months, with Katarina sharing details about her family history, her university education, and her modest life in Minsk that made Marcus feel protective and generous. By June, Marcus had decided he was ready to meet Katarina in person. The marriage agency arranged for her to visit New York for 2 weeks, with Marcus covering all expenses including her visa, flights, and accommodation at a boutique hotel in Midtown Manhattan. The meeting would allow them to spend time together in person before making any final decisions about marriage. Katarina arrived at JFK Airport on a humid Thursday evening in early July, and Marcus felt his breath catch when he saw her walking through the international arrivals gate. The photographs on her profile had been beautiful, but in person, she was absolutely stunning. Tall and elegant with perfect posture, she moved with a grace that made other travelers seem clumsy by comparison. Her English, while accented, was far better than he had expected, and her smile when she spotted him holding the welcome sign with her name was radiant enough to make him forget the exhaustion from his 14-hour workday. "Marcus," she said, her voice carrying the musical quality he had imagined during their phone conversations. "Finally we meet in person. I am so grateful you make this possible." The 2 weeks that followed exceeded Marcus's highest expectations. Katarina was everything her letters had promised and more. She was genuinely impressed by his apartment, his lifestyle, and his success, but not in the calculating way that had made him uncomfortable with previous relationships. Her appreciation seemed authentic, born from someone who had lived modestly and could truly value abundance. She was fascinated by his work, asking thoughtful questions about international finance and showing genuine interest in his achievements. When he took her to expensive restaurants, she was gracious and cultured, clearly comfortable in sophisticated environments despite her modest background. She fit seamlessly into his world while maintaining the charm and freshness that had attracted him in the first place. Most importantly, Katarina made Marcus feel like the man he had always wanted to be. She was proud to take his arm at business dinners, impressed by his knowledge and connections, grateful for his generosity without being demanding or entitled. With her, he felt successful not just professionally, but personally, finally finding someone who appreciated everything he had worked to build. "I never imagined American men could be so cultured and generous," she told him as they walked through Central Park on their final Sunday together. In Belarus, successful men are often crude, interested only in showing off wealth. "You are different, sophisticated. This is what I've been dreaming to find." By the end of her visit, Marcus was completely convinced that he had found his perfect partner. Katarina represented everything he wanted in a wife: beauty, intelligence, traditional values, and genuine appreciation for his success. When he proposed on her last night in New York, presenting her with a 4-carat diamond ring from Tiffany, her tears of joy seemed completely authentic. "Yes, Marcus," she whispered, her accent making his name sound exotic and romantic. "I will be honored to be your wife. You have given me chance for new life, and I will spend every day making you happy you chose me." The wedding was planned for October 15th, 2024, giving Katarina time to arrange her visa, settle her affairs in Belarus, and prepare for her permanent move to America. Marcus threw himself into the preparations with the same intensity he brought to his biggest deals, wanting every detail to reflect the importance of the occasion and his excitement about their future together. The Plaza Hotel had been his only choice for the venue. Nothing else would adequately express his feelings about the woman who had finally made his personal life as successful as his professional one. The presidential suite was reserved for their wedding night, with rose petals, champagne, and every romantic detail that Marcus's newfound happiness had inspired him to arrange. As October approached and the final preparations were completed, Marcus felt a satisfaction he had never experienced before. At 32, he was finally going to have the complete life he had always envisioned. Career success, financial security, and a beautiful wife who understood and appreciated everything he had worked to achieve. What Marcus didn't know was that Katarina Volkov was not the English teacher from Minsk that her profile had claimed. Her real name was Katarina Kozlova, and she was a trained operative whose specialty was infiltrating the lives of wealthy Western men for purposes that had nothing to do with love or marriage. The romantic letters, the grateful tears, the apparent innocence, all of it had been carefully calculated performance designed to make Marcus fall completely under her spell. The wedding Marcus was planning as the beginning of his perfect life was actually the final stage of an operation that would cost him everything he had built, and possibly his life itself. October 15th, 2024 dawned crisp and perfect in Manhattan, with golden autumn light streaming through the massive windows of the Plaza Hotel's presidential suite. Marcus Davidson stood before the mirror in his custom-tailored tuxedo, adjusting his Hermes tie for the third time as wedding preparations swirled around him in a carefully orchestrated symphony of luxury. Downtown, Katarina Volkov was completing her own transformation in the bridal suite, surrounded by a team of stylists who had spent hours creating the image of the perfect bride. Her ivory silk gown, imported from Milan at Marcus's insistence, fit her slender frame like it had been painted on. The 4-carat diamond engagement ring caught the light with every movement, but Katarina's mind was focused on details that had nothing to do with wedding aesthetics. The ceremony itself was everything Marcus had envisioned and more. 200 of New York's financial elite gathered in the Plaza's grand ballroom, a stunning display of wealth and sophistication that represented the pinnacle of Marcus's social ambitions. Katarina walked down the aisle with ethereal grace, her smile radiant as she approached the man who believed he was claiming his prize. "You are the most beautiful bride I have ever seen," Marcus whispered as they exchanged vows, his voice thick with genuine emotion. For him, this moment represented the completion of everything he had worked toward: professional success, financial security, and now the perfect partner to share his achievements. Katarina's response was perfectly calibrated. "Today I become complete," she said, her accent giving the words an exotic charm that made Marcus's heart race. "You have given me new life, and I promise to honor that gift every day." The reception flowed seamlessly from cocktail hour to dinner to dancing, with Marcus introducing his new wife to business associates and longtime friends who were clearly impressed by his choice. Katarina played her role flawlessly, charming everyone with her combination of European sophistication and grateful humility. "She's absolutely stunning," whispered Patricia Coleman, the wife of Marcus's most important client. "And so cultured. You could tell she comes from good breeding. Not like these American girls who only care about their careers." As the evening progressed and guests began to leave, Marcus felt a deep satisfaction settling over him. Everything had gone perfectly. Katarina had been the ideal bride, gracious and beautiful, clearly devoted to him and appreciative of the life he was offering her. But as they prepared to retire to their honeymoon suite, neither Marcus nor his guests realized that Katarina had spent the evening doing more than playing the perfect bride. She had been carefully studying the guest list, memorizing faces and names, cataloging information about Marcus's business relationships and financial connections that would prove invaluable in the weeks ahead. The presidential suite had been decorated with thousands of rose petals and dozens of candles, creating an atmosphere of romance that Marcus hoped would mark the beginning of their perfect married life. Vintage champagne waited on ice, and the floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of Central Park bathed in moonlight. "This is like fairy tale," Katarina said as they entered the suite, her voice filled with wonder that seemed completely genuine. "I never imagined such beauty was possible." But as Marcus moved to open the champagne, Katarina's demeanor began to shift in ways so subtle that he didn't immediately notice. Her smile became slightly more calculating, her posture more alert, her eyes scanning the room with professional efficiency rather than bridal bliss. The transformation would have been invisible to most people, but Katarina was no longer playing the role of grateful bride. She was preparing to complete a mission that had been months in the making, one that would reveal Marcus's perfect new wife as something far more dangerous than he could ever imagine. As midnight approached, and the last sounds of celebration faded from the hotel corridors below, Marcus Davidson was about to discover that his dream wedding night would become the most terrifying experience of his life. The champagne cork popped with a satisfying sound as Marcus poured 2 glasses of Dom Perignon, the golden liquid catching the candlelight like liquid gold. The presidential suite stretched around them like a scene from a romantic movie, with rose petals scattered across the marble floors and the glittering Manhattan skyline providing a backdrop that seemed almost too perfect to be real. "To us," Marcus said, raising his glass toward his new wife. "To the beginning of our perfect life together." Katarina accepted the glass with a smile that Marcus interpreted as shy happiness, but there was something different in her eyes now, a sharpness that hadn't been there during the ceremony. She sipped the champagne delicately, her movements still graceful, but somehow more purposeful than before. "Marcus," she said, setting down her glass and moving closer to him. "Before we celebrate, I must tell you something important. Something I cannot say until we were married, and I knew you were truly committed to me." The words sent a small chill through Marcus's chest, but he maintained his confident smile. "Whatever it is, we'll handle it together. That's what marriage means." Katarina's laugh was soft, but carried an edge that made Marcus suddenly aware of how isolated they were in the luxury suite. "You are so trusting, my husband. So American in your optimism. But the world is more complicated than you understand." She moved to the window, her silk wedding gown flowing behind her as she gazed out at the city lights. When she turned back to face him, Marcus saw that the shy, grateful bride from their courtship had been replaced by someone entirely different. Her posture was straighter, more confident, and her accent seemed less pronounced, as if she had been deliberately exaggerating it before. "My name is not Katarina Volkov," she said, her voice now carrying a cold authority that made Marcus's blood freeze. "It is Katarina Kozlova, and I work for people who have been very interested in your business activities for quite some time." Marcus felt the champagne glass slip from his fingers, the crystal shattering against the marble floor in a sound that seemed to echo through the suddenly threatening suite. "What are you talking about? This is some kind of joke, right? You're nervous about our wedding night. So you're—" "I'm not nervous," Katarina interrupted, her transformation now complete. The hesitant English teacher from Belarus had vanished, replaced by someone who spoke with the confidence of a person accustomed to being in control of dangerous situations. "I'm exactly where I planned to be from the moment I first responded to your messages on that pathetic dating website." The room seemed to spin around Marcus as the implications of her words began to sink in. Everything he had believed about their relationship, every moment of connection and intimacy they had shared, had been an elaborate deception designed to bring him to this exact moment. The letters, the visit to New York, the wedding, all of it was fake. His voice cracked with the devastation of someone watching their entire world collapse in real time. "Not fake," Katarina corrected, moving to the sweets bar where she poured herself a vodka with the casual confidence of someone completely comfortable in her surroundings. "Carefully planned. You see, Marcus, you have been involved in some business transactions that attracted attention from people who prefer to remain in the shadows. Your expertise in Eastern European acquisitions has been very profitable for you, but some of those profits came from sources that your American government would find problematic." Marcus's analytical mind began racing through his recent deals, trying to understand what she was implying. His specialty had always been identifying undervalued companies in former Soviet states, businesses that could be acquired cheaply and restructured for massive profits. The work was complex and sometimes involved navigating gray areas of international law, but he had always been careful to stay within legal boundaries. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "All of my deals are completely legitimate. I have lawyers, compliance officers, background checks. You have paperwork," Katarina said dismissively. "Very impressive paperwork that hides the fact that several of your most profitable acquisitions were fronts for money laundering operations connected to Russian organized crime. You helped them move millions of dollars through legitimate American businesses, and you took substantial fees for your services." The accusation hit Marcus like a physical blow. He had always prided himself on his due diligence, his careful research, his ethical business practices. The idea that he had unknowingly facilitated criminal activity was devastating enough. But the calculated way Katarina was delivering this information suggested something far worse was coming. Even if that were true, he said, grasping for some way to regain control of the situation, I had no knowledge of any criminal activity. I'm a legitimate businessman. I file tax returns, follow SEC regulations. Knowledge is irrelevant. Katarina interrupted, moving closer to him with the predatory grace of someone who had been trained for exactly this type of confrontation. What matters is evidence. And unfortunately for you, my employers have been very thorough in documenting your involvement in their operations. She reached into her purse, which Marcus now realized had been strategically placed within easy reach, and withdrew a tablet computer. With a few swift gestures, she brought up a series of documents that made Marcus's knees weak with recognition. Bank records showing wire transfers to accounts he had never seen before. Email communications that had been altered to suggest his knowledge of illegal activities. Photographs of him at business meetings with men he now recognized from FBI wanted posters. The evidence was comprehensive, professional, and utterly damning. This is impossible, Marcus whispered, studying the documents that would destroy his career, his freedom, and his life if they ever became public. These communications, these transactions, I never authorized any of this. Authorization is also irrelevant, Katarina said, her voice carrying the patience of someone explaining simple concepts to a child. What matters is that these documents exist, and that they paint a very clear picture of an American investment banker who knowingly facilitated Russian money laundering operations for personal profit. The full scope of the trap began to dawn on Marcus. This hadn't been a romance that went wrong or a marriage based on deception. This had been a sophisticated intelligence operation designed to compromise him completely, and Katarina had played her role with the skill of a professional operative. What do you want? He asked, though he already suspected the answer would be worse than anything he could imagine. Katarina's smile was genuinely warm for the first time since her transformation began, but it carried a coldness that made Marcus realize how completely he had misjudged the woman he had married just hours earlier. I want you to continue being the successful American businessman that my employers found so useful, she said. But now you will be working directly for them, using your expertise and connections to facilitate operations that are far more profitable than your previous work. Marcus felt trapped between his growing terror and his analytical mind, which was trying to find some way out of an impossible situation. And if I refuse, then these documents become public, along with additional evidence that will ensure you spend the rest of your life in federal prison. Katarina replied matter-of-factly. Your choice is simple. Continue your successful career under new management, or lose everything you have worked to build. As the implications settled over him, Marcus realized that his perfect wedding night had become the moment his life was stolen from him by the woman he had trusted completely. But what he didn't yet understand was that Katarina's mission involved more than just compromising his business activities. The organization she worked for had invested significant resources in this operation, and they expected returns that went beyond simple cooperation. Marcus Davidson wasn't just being recruited as an asset. He was being prepared for something far more permanent and far more deadly. The presidential suite felt smaller now, as if the walls were closing in around Marcus as he processed the magnitude of his situation. Katarina watched his internal struggle with the detached interest of someone observing a laboratory experiment, occasionally sipping her vodka while he paced frantically between the window and the bed. You're insane if you think I'll cooperate with criminals, Marcus said, his voice gaining strength as his initial shock transformed into anger. I'll go to the FBI myself. I'll explain everything. The fake marriage, the manufactured evidence, all of it. Katarina's expression didn't change, but she set down her glass and reached into her purse again. This time she withdrew a sleek black pistol that she held with obvious familiarity, keeping it pointed casually toward the floor, but making her message clear. Marcus, darling, she said, her voice taking on a patronizing tone that made him realize how completely he had underestimated her from the beginning. You still don't understand your situation. This is not a negotiation. This is not a business deal where you can walk away if the terms are unfavorable. The sight of the weapon made everything brutally real in a way that documents and threats had not. Marcus was trapped in a luxury hotel suite with a trained operative who had spent months infiltrating his life, and no one in the world knew he was in danger. The FBI investigation into your activities begins tomorrow, Katarina continued, consulting her phone with casual efficiency. Anonymous tips about suspicious wire transfers, photographs of you meeting with known criminals, testimony from witnesses who will swear you knowingly participated in money laundering operations. Marcus felt his legs give out, collapsing onto the edge of the bed as the full scope of the operation became clear. This hadn't been improvised or opportunistic. It had been planned with military precision, designed to leave him with no options except complete compliance. However, Katarina said, moving closer but keeping the pistol visible, there is one scenario where those tips never get made, where the evidence disappears, where Marcus Davidson continues his successful career without interference from law enforcement. What scenario? Marcus asked, though he dreaded the answer. You have a heart attack tonight. Tragic, but not uncommon for a man under stress. New marriage, big wedding, too much champagne, too much excitement. Her tone was conversational, as if she were discussing weekend plans rather than his murder. Your widow inherits everything, of course. Your accounts, your business connections, your reputation. She continues your work, but with new priorities. The casual way she discussed his death made Marcus's blood turn to ice. This had never been about recruiting him as an asset. It had been about replacing him entirely. Katarina would become his widow, inherit his wealth and connections, and use his established business relationships to facilitate criminal operations on a scale far beyond anything he had unknowingly touched. You're talking about murdering me on our wedding night, Marcus said, the words barely audible. I'm talking about completing a mission that has required significant investment and planning, Katarina replied. Your death solves multiple problems while creating opportunities that a living, potentially uncooperative Marcus Davidson could never provide. Marcus's mind raced through possible escape routes, but the suite was 42 floors above street level. Katarina was clearly armed and trained, and no one would be looking for him until he failed to appear at work on Monday morning. The irony is quite beautiful, Katarina continued, apparently enjoying his growing desperation. You spent your entire career helping wealthy people acquire undervalued assets. Tonight, you become the undervalued asset that someone else acquires. As midnight approached and the hotel corridors grew quiet, Marcus realized that his perfect wedding night was about to become his final night. The woman he had loved, trusted, and married was preparing to kill him with the same professional efficiency she had used to infiltrate his life. But what Marcus didn't know was that Katarina had made one crucial mistake in her months of careful planning. A mistake that would turn their luxury suite into a battlefield where only one of them would survive to see the sunrise. The mistake that would cost Katarina everything was her assumption that Marcus Davidson had become wealthy through luck and privilege rather than intelligence and ruthless determination. While she had studied his financial records and business relationships, she had underestimated the survival instincts that had carried him from small-town Ohio to the heights of Manhattan finance. Before you kill me, Marcus said, his voice steadier than he felt, I need to show you something that will change your plans completely. Katarina's expression remained coldly professional, but Marcus detected a flicker of curiosity. You have 30 seconds to explain why anything you could show me would matter. Marcus moved slowly to his jacket, keeping his hands visible as he withdrew his phone. 3 months ago, I hired a private security firm to conduct background checks on everyone in my personal life, including you. The statement was a lie, but Marcus delivered it with the confidence that had made him successful in high-stakes negotiations. He opened his phone to a fake email thread he had hastily composed while Katarina was explaining her plans, grateful for the paranoid security measures that had become second nature in his business dealings. Katarina Volkov doesn't exist, he continued, showing her the screen. But Katarina Kozlova has quite an impressive file. Former Spetsnaz training, connections to the Kozlov crime family, wanted by Interpol for 3 separate murders in Germany and France. For the first time since her transformation, Katarina looked genuinely surprised. The fake documentation Marcus was showing her was convincing enough to create doubt about how much he actually knew about her real identity and mission. More importantly, Marcus said, pressing his advantage. My security firm has standing instructions to release all information about threats to my safety if I fail to check in every 12 hours. That includes detailed profiles of anyone who might wish me harm. The bluff was desperate, but delivered with conviction. Marcus was gambling that Katarina's professional training would make her cautious about variables she hadn't accounted for, and her slight hesitation suggested the gamble might pay off. "You're lying," she said, but her voice carried less certainty than before. "Am I?" Marcus replied, moving closer with calculated boldness. "You spent months learning about my business practices, but did you study how someone becomes successful in international finance? It requires being paranoid about everything and everyone, trusting no one completely." Katarina's training kicked in as she recognized the possibility that her mission had been compromised from the beginning. If Marcus had genuine intelligence about her identity and organization, killing him without understanding the full scope of his knowledge could expose the entire operation. "Show me this security file," she demanded, gesturing with the pistol for him to hand over his phone. Marcus made his move as she reached for the device. Years of racquetball and daily gym sessions had kept him in better shape than his desk job suggested, and desperation gave him speed that caught Katarina off guard. He grabbed her wrist and twisted hard, using techniques from self-defense classes he had taken after receiving death threats from disgruntled clients. The pistol discharged into the marble floor as they struggled, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. Katarina's combat training quickly asserted itself, and she broke free from his grip with a brutal elbow strike that sent him reeling backward. But Marcus had achieved his primary objective. The weapon was no longer in her immediate control. As Katarina dove for the gun, Marcus grabbed the heavy crystal champagne bucket and brought it down on her head with all the force his terror and rage could provide. The impact dropped Katarina instantly, blood pooling beneath her blonde hair as she lay motionless on the rose-petal-strewn floor. Marcus stood over her body, the champagne bucket still in his trembling hands, hardly believing he had survived the encounter. The irony was devastating. His perfect bride, who had seemed to represent everything he wanted in a partner, had been planning to murder him for his money and connections. The marriage that was supposed to complete his ideal life had instead revealed how completely he had misjudged his ability to read people and situations. As sirens began to wail in the distance, the gunshot had apparently been reported by other hotel guests. Marcus realized that surviving Katarina's assassination attempt was only the beginning of his problems. The evidence she had shown him might have been fabricated, but his involvement in questionable business deals was real enough to attract serious FBI scrutiny. The hotel room that had been decorated for romance was now a crime scene that would dominate headlines for months. Marcus Davidson, the successful investment banker who had seemed to have everything figured out, would spend the next several years explaining to federal investigators how he had unknowingly married a Russian operative on what was supposed to be the happiest night of his life. When police arrived at the presidential suite, they found Marcus sitting calmly beside his wife's body, no longer the confident financier who had dominated Manhattan boardrooms. The man who had built his career on analyzing risks and managing complex situations had discovered that the most dangerous gamble of his life had been trusting someone completely. The investigation that followed revealed the sophisticated nature of the operation that had targeted him, but it also exposed the questionable business practices that had made him valuable to criminal organizations in the first place. Marcus's survival had saved his life, but destroyed his career, leaving him with the bitter knowledge that his perfect wedding night had been the end of everything he thought he had built. In the end, both Marcus and Katarina had been victims of their own assumptions. She had underestimated his desperation and survival instincts, while he had overestimated his ability to identify and control the people around him. Their luxury suite became a tomb, not for Marcus as planned, but for the illusions both of them had carried about love, trust, and the prices people pay for the lives they think they want.